It's recording.
Super. So it's August 5th. Good morning to you all again. My name is Lloyd Stock. I'm taking you through this series of um, training on Blackboard Ultra, as you transition your practice over to the latest version of our course experience. We met yesterday for a sort of high-level overview of navigation across Blackboard, lay down some key concepts around navigation and movement and things like that, which will be really useful to you as we go into today's topic, which is around content creation and organization. So, three main takeaways really for today's session. We want to think about how we can best display content in Ultra, what our options are for that, and obviously that it's going to depend on exactly what you want to achieve from a pedagogical point of view, what your what students that you've got in your cohort best need. But we'll give you all the tools you need to display content. We'll talk about a number of tools, including some capabilities in Blackboard that will help you create content and display content, organize content in ways that make it reduce friction for you, basically, in ways that streamline your experience. And as we do that, as we talk through these different workflows, we'll try and make frequent reference to accessibility, how we can uh, provide a more inclusive experience for all of our learners by using some of the accessibility controls that are in Blackboard. We just had a bit of a nod to that yesterday, but we'll get into some more of that in today's session. So those are the main takeaways for today's session. Usual rules of engagement here. If you've got any questions as we go through, just come on, shout out on the mic, or raise your hand, or enter a question in chat. That's also cool as well. Let's move my windows around here. No worries, Kadisha. That's fine. Okay, so we need to start from where we began yesterday, which was inside of the Ultra course here. And we're primarily going to be focused on this content tab today. Yesterday, we talked about communication, so calendar announcements, discussions, and messages. Today, we're going to focus primarily on creation of content. Hey, Anna. And so we're going to be in this space here for today's session. Now, we already talked a little bit about organization of learning modules, and we showed how this little handle on the left-hand side, these six dots, operates as literally that. It's a handle. You click on it with your mouse, and then you start to move the object around, and you can change the order of things from a overall learning module perspective. Um, so that we saw yesterday that applies to objects inside a learning module as well. So we can move things like this around as well. And we saw that by tapping on, um, let's just close that, by uh, by right-clicking on any object and then using the tab key, we can actually use our keyboard, tab to go forward, shift tab to go back. Well, you can use our keyboard to move things around using the cursor keys. Once you've got your focus on that handle, that little blue halo you can see around the handle, if you tap the space bar, then the object that you're wanting to move pops out of the page, and then you use the up and down arrows on your keyboard to move it around. And you can keep going if you want to drop it into the next learning module. Just have to wait a moment, and then it opens up and you can drop it in. So super easy to move things around. And sometimes, as I said yesterday, sometimes it's easier to use the keyboard because the, a mouse is very good for precise control within the real estate that you've got on your screen. But if you're having to, go up and down a vertical space, the mouse can be more challenging. Whenever you hit the bottom of the screen, you have this sort of pause, and then you have to wait for the computer to realize, yeah, I want to go down. So, yeah, in other words, using your keyboard might be better for this sort of movement of objects. when we're happy to drop this object where we want it to be dropped, we press the space bar again, and that then drops it into this area here. Okay, so that'll take a bit of getting used to, just the way that works. And if you prefer to use your mouse, you can absolutely do that in any given space that you can see in one go. Um, you can do that relatively quickly and easily. Okay, let's move that over there. So that's how you move objects around. And if you ever are in this view here, if we go into one of these objects, on the left-hand side, you can see this table of contents menu. Incidentally, if it looks like this, i.e., you can't see that table of contents menu, it's just because it's been collapsed. And you just saw how I did that. If we tap this contents button here, it reopens again. So you can collapse or expand that table of contents um, in the way that I've just demonstrated. Now, you can't change the order of these objects in this view. Okay, what we can change here is the contents of these individual objects. So we can change this content here, um, but we can't change the order. To change the order, we need to drop out of this learning module, come back into here, and then we'd move these things around. And then when you do that, when you go back into this object here, you'll see now that link that I've moved as the change in sequence is now reflected in the table of contents. Okay, and that's what students are going to see. They're going to see this sequence here, and then when they're inside of a learning module content page, they're going to see this here as well with the table of contents. So I think that's kind of a crucial concept in terms of getting your content to display the way you want it to. Um, let's just move that back up there and move this back up the top as well. You probably won't want to change the order of these default objects. These come from your template, the Cobalt template, or one of the Cobalt templates. And for the most part, you'll want students to experience a high degree of parity between one course and another. If there's disparity, then it's harder for students to find things like the browser checker, like the technical requirements. If we keep moving those types of things around, you know what I'm saying. We want as much parity as possible from course to course. But if we collapse this, remember we use this little accent. It's what's called an accordion. If you know what if you're a musician like me, you know what an accordion is. Um, but this collapses and expands when you tap this little accent character here. So we're probably not going to change the sequence and order of things that are in the basic template. But when we get to our unit or our week folders, that's where we need to start moving things around. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about creating content. Um, and in order to do that, I'm going to start by creating a document in Ultra, an actual Ultra document, not a Word document or an Excel document or a PowerPoint document. We're going to actually create a Blackboard document. Now, I mentioned this at the end of yesterday's session. To place new content in a Blackboard Ultra course, you can be very directive about where you want that content to be. So let's go down to Unit 1. Let's scroll down to the Unit 1 folder. Okay. And then in here, inside the reading and resources, I'm going to expand that folder. So I'm clicking this little button on the right hand side, a little accordion. And see, I have this plus symbol there. If I tap that plus symbol, it brings up a whole bunch of options that I can choose from. Now, we're just going to start off with creating, because I want you to see some of the inbuilt options we have in Ultra for creating content. But you can see there's a wide range of options here we've got, and you can experiment with those in your own time. We'll see if we have time to come back and talk about some of these other content types towards the end of today's session. Let's click create. And here are all the inbuilt options we've got in Ultra for creating content. Now, we want to focus on these items in today's session. We'll come back and talk about tests and assignments and those types of formative and summative tools. But for today, let's just focus on creating content directly, and we'll use this document content item in order to do that. Now, just like the discussion forum that we saw yesterday when we were thinking about communication, this has a very similar look and feel. Top left, the flashing cursor on a new document shows us, okay, this is the first thing we need to do. We need to give this a name. Okay, so I'm just going to put here introduction. Could be put module or unit one introduction. Um, Remember on the right hand side, we've got these controls for visibility and it's always hidden by default when you create it. We'll talk about release conditions a little bit later. We've got the settings icon over here, which allows us to turn on class conversations, something we didn't talk about yesterday, but it's another communication tool in Ultra that allows for spontaneous, ad hoc, ungraded conversations, to serendipitous conversations to happen alongside the content that you're creating. It's turned off by default, but if you feel like there's value in having a sidebar conversation to this page that you're creating, this document you're creating, and you'd rather encourage in-class conversation that you can monitor and facilitate rather than students using, something like WhatsApp and or whatever they might be using, then this might be a way to do that. In reality, they probably are going to use their own communities that they create, but this is a way of having that sidebar conversation inside of the course. So when we have set up the title here, um, you'll notice that the Ultra in documents, it, the building of content is built around this idea of blocks. Okay, and when you're creating a Word document, you have sort of lines, and you keep typing, and you press enter, and you build lines of content. In Excel, content is structured it's structured in cells and columns. In PowerPoint, it's a little bit more sort of there's a bit more freedom about where you create content, and that's really what we've got here. We've got more freedom, perhaps not quite as free as PowerPoint, and there's a good reason for that. We want this content to work well on a mobile device. Not all of not a, not not all mobile devices are going to cope well with something that's laid out in a very kind of casual way. So we need to be quite explicit about what these blocks are and how they look on the page, so that they work well on a 4-inch smartphone. Although I'm aging myself because most smartphones nowadays are a lot bigger than that. But we want to make this work on a mobile device. So Ultra immediately presents to me a bunch of options that I can create content in. And what you can do here may be slightly different to what I've got. It depends on institutional controls. Let's start with this convert to file option because I want to show you a mechanism in Ultra that allows you to utilize existing content that you've got. Now, I teach on a music composition course, and so I'm just going to show you what it looks like to take a document that I created for a music composition course and convert that into an Ultra document. So just bear with me a second. It's going to do a search. Not that one. Let's take this one here, this syllabus document. So I'm just going to upload it. So what's happening now is this file's getting uploaded into Blackboard. It's using some light touch artificial intelligence capabilities to extract the document and drop it into this text editor block. This is just a content block. If I tap out of the block, you can see it's sitting there nicely on the page. And so just by uploading a Word document, I've been able to create content that is mobile friendly. If you were to put a Word document on here and then students try to open the Word document on their mobile device, it's going to be quite a cumbersome experience for them. Um, this is mobile friendly. If we collapse this down, if I just save this and collapse this down on a mobile device, it's going to look just fine. Now, there's some formatting I need to do, but the point is, it's super responsive to different sizes of screen. So that's one illustration of this. Let me show you another example. I convert another file here, and this time I'm going to take a PowerPoint file. Um, if I can, here we go. So this is the PowerPoint file. You should be able to see a multi-page, a multi-slide document, and we're just gonna see what Ultra can do with that. So again, it gets uploaded. It gets sort of pulled apart by the translation tool we've got here, translating the slides into a document. And if we tap off, we can see that it's pulled the images in. It's pulled in the different contents of the slide, any actual any content that's structured properly within the slide has been pulled out. And so you may be able to take some existing content that you've got and translate it very quickly into an Ultra document. Now, maybe you're not entirely happy with this layout, um, and you want to make some adjustments, but you'd rather have Blackboard make some suggestions for you about the layout. If you tap this button here to auto generate the layout, it's going to attempt to lay out that again in a slightly more aesthetically pleasing way, and in a way that takes full use of the full width of the page. Um, the length of time that this takes to do will depend on the length of document that you're working with, and I'll come to your question in a minute, Deborah. Great question. If we apply that layout now, you can see that it looks it's it basically resized the image. It's made them a little bit bigger. Um, I would want to make some additional changes to this, including making it a two-column layout, and I'll show you how to do that. But this is just a demonstration, basically, of one of these new capabilities in Ultra that might make it easy for you to translate some existing documents you have into a mobile-friendly format. Now, the one downside of this is that if you share with them a PDF or Word document, those are offline formats. Offline formats. So you don't have to be connected to the internet to open a Word document once it's saved on the device. Whereas this needs to be accessed with an internet connection. So apart from any other trade-offs, that is one of the benefits of using something like a Word document or a PDF. Once it's downloaded to the device, it's then a truly offline format. This is inside of a web page. So bear that in mind. But that's it's worth demonstrating how this works. Now I'm going to get rid of that now, and we're going to we just undo. We can use these undo buttons here to go back to the beginning again, and we're going to start from the ground up. So that's taking existing content. And to Deborah's question, why not just attach a link to your original document to the content area? Absolutely, yeah. If you're comfortable that they've got Microsoft Word on their devices, and not in a lot of institutions, you might even have a license for that um, as part of your Microsoft provision at Coldwell. That's great. Not every student is going to have Microsoft Word in every instance, um, and again, viewing web-based content on a mobile device in Word maybe their experience may be not as smooth or as streamlined perhaps as what we've just displayed. PDFs on the other hand, they're very accessible. They work fairly well on a mobile device. But again, if you've got an A4 PDF and you shrink it down to a 4 or 5 inch smartphone, sometimes you have to do a lot of pinch and zooming. So this is just a slightly more responsive, more mobile first way of creating content. But absolutely, it's probably good, Deborah, to attach that file as well. And they've got both options, depending on what, how they want to learn and how they want to access content. All right. Okay. So yeah, to let's just say this a second. So to Deborah's point, if we want to, we can come in here tap create, and we're going to upload that document. So I can do that now. Let's find that same PowerPoint document that we found earlier. Um, uh, no, we can't find it. Let's do a search for Mary. There we go. There it is. So I can upload that. And now this time this gets uploaded as a straight PowerPoint file. Okay. Now I get to change the name here, so I can make this um, more attractive. It doesn't need to be um, the actual name of the file. I can decide, you'll get this often in Ultra, you can decide whether you want students to have the ability just to view, not download, just to download and not have the inline viewer that you're about to see, or both. Bear in mind, if you say view only and they really want to download it and they know what they're doing, they can download it. So this is just like, it's just kind of what is the default option for them to see the content. Um, there's no way there's no rock bottom way for you to stop them from downloading content that you upload. That clever clever digitally literate students will find ways. This is just like what the default experience is for them. I'm going to allow them to do both. So we tap save. And now that file is you can see it's a presentation. Now that file is loaded in the content area. If we tap that file, it opens in a sort of a preview format. Okay, so not quite as mobile friendly. Doesn't It's not like snappy. It doesn't load really quickly. But now that it's cached, it will probably load relatively quickly. Um, it's a pretty good experience, and you can do this for PowerPoint, Word documents. You can do that for a number of different formats like that. It's not a bad experience. So it depends on, what your preference is, what you think the students' preferences might be. And on the right hand side here, because we said they could download it, see that little box icon with an arrow pointing down. Tap that and downloads it to my downloads folder. So the students are in this case given the option to download. Okay, so that was, to Deborah's point, that's a perfectly feasible option. Depends what you're trying to do. And there are a couple of bells and whistles you're going to see a little bit later um, around knowledge checks, which they might sort of nudge you in the direction of creating content that's native in Blackboard. So everything that Blackboard was doing there, any other questions before we move on? You're all tracking with me so far? Yeah, great. Okay. So everything that Blackboard was doing, thanks to it, everything that Blackboard was doing there was actually taking content from formats like a Word document or a PowerPoint, and it was creating all these different blocks on the page. And these blocks are this type of block here, content blocks. So let's tap that and see what we get up on the screen. So um, what happens is we get a full width. The full page is filled with a single block of space, and we get all these controls here in order to actually start creating content. I'm not going to go through these one by one because, like, most of you will have some intuition about what this is all about anyway, and I don't want to bore you to tears. We'll just go over it very, very quickly. So we've got text styles. Use those consistently because use of those consistently, and I'm sorry if I'm telling you things you already know. I'm just assuming that some people might not know this, but consistent use of titles in the right spaces, it includes behind the scenes information in the web page that can be used by screen readers to convey a sense of structure in the document. A bit like when you do styles in Word, it's the same kind of thing. So use those styles consistently to create that structure, which might not be immediately apparent from a visual perspective, especially in a long document, but will certainly be very, very meaningful when someone's using a screen reader, for example. Fonts, a limited set of fonts, and you're going to want to steer in the direction, of fonts that are legible Times New Roman, um, for me, it'd have to be a very niche use case for that because it's not the most readable font on a screen. But there's options to give you flexibility. Font sizes, again, nothing too small, nothing too big, given that it's going to scale anyway based on a mobile device or a large device. Color picker, some fairly high contrast colors. We're not going into all of the wacky and wonderful world of, you know, pinks and luminous greens. It's just high contrast colors that work. Font adaptations, options around superscripts, but also code snippets and strike through. Options for creating tables. And when you do that, notice, so here's the thing. Notice that when we tap on any one of these given menu options, in some cases we get drop down. In other cases, we get a sub menu giving us options that are accessible without having to click a drop down menu. Yeah. So if I were to create a table, for example, I get a sub menu that's pertinent to creating tables and managing tables. I'm going to tap the undo button up here because I don't want to do that for now. Alignment, uh, lists, different form of lists, including bulleted lists, highly recommended for accessibility purposes. We get an undo button which just pertains to this block, not the overall document. We get a clear format. When do you think you'd use the clear format tool? Any sort of thoughts on what that might be for? When would the formatting in here be potentially a bit chaotic, and I would possibly need to use the clear format tool? Any ideas? So
Lloyd, what I would say, and this is just me throwing something out there, sometimes with some teachers, you may have taught a course like repetitive semesters, and you're kind of like copying and pasting information. And sometimes what might happen is you might have had the unit one introduction, but you pasted unit two's information in there or something like that. I think that that would be a good option to use if you want to get that information out in quick time before you save. So I'm thinking that.
yeah. So if that con exactly, so if that content has come across and it's come across with um let's say you save it and it looks a bit weird on the screen and you think, oh, that's weird. That didn't look when I was editing it, it didn't look like that. But when you save it, it kind of displays weird. There's some extra spaces or some weird kind of, font spacing issues. If that happens, that's when that copied content that you've pasted in needs the clear content tool. So you might have, a whole bunch of content in here. Let's just grab some lorem ipsum just to fill our page with some text.
My thought would be you should always do the clear format if you're copy and pasting content because it's always going to be scrambled, right? It's not going to look the way you want to look it for the best way for a student to read it.
Yeah, yeah, it does depend. You're right, Deborah. You definitely when you copy and paste content, you want to double check that it's displaying properly. If it comes through, to save you hassle, you don't always have to use the clear format feature. But if something is a bit funky when you save, or then it's definitely that's the way to go. So I've just copied some content from a web page here, and if I'm a little bit uncertain that this has got some funkiness in it, I can tap clear format. Notice the bold or the strong formatting that was on those initial two words. That's lost. So now the downside of this is I now have to go through it and reformat text that has those kinds of stylistic changes to them. But the upside is that I get a document that's not gonna mess around. If you here's a classic use case. If you copy and paste content, which is different to what I've been doing earlier when I upload the document and it translates it into a document structure. if you copy a content from Microsoft Word into web page, it almost certainly will have, not necessarily visible, but it will have possibly some invisible characters in there which play havoc with the formatting and the layout. So whenever you bring stuff in from Word, always almost always use the clear format tool so that you know that this is not going to play funny from a formatting point of view. So that's the clear format tool. Links, okay. So I can double click on a string of text here, tap the link tool, and then it opens a modal, a little sort of box here where I can paste in a link, and then I can tap insert, and that then becomes the hyperlink. Attach files. So if you want to, back to Deborah's question earlier, if you want to attach the file that that's relevant, you can attach that and it will show it here as an embedded file. I'll just show you that now. Why not? So let's here's a picture of the Abbey Gardens, which is a lovely civic center here in the town that I live in. Um, so I'll show you this now. Because it's an image that I'm uploading, it's going to give me options here for how I present this to the student. Uh, Again, we get the file options. Like this, I'm going to just choose view, and then in here, I need to put a alternative text description in an aerial view, an aerial view of the um, renowned Abbey Gardens, a major tourist attraction in the town of Bury St. So you now all know where I live, but I'm not giving you any more than that. If it's decorative, then you can obviously just mark it as decorative. Okay. But this is now going to describe the image. There's probably a little bit extra I could do there in terms of the description, but that'll do for now. We'll click save, and then the image becomes visible here inside of this block. Okay. Um, so that's the image tool, and you can tap on the image, and when you do that, you get a delete button up here. But you also get a edit attachment icon on the toolbar, which allows you to go back into the screen we were just looking at and make adjustments. So you can always do that after the event. Let's tap save, and then that's all now saved to the cloud. You do need to get into the habit of regularly saving the page. It doesn't do it automatically. Okay. If you make a mistake, you have these undo buttons, which can be useful. But now that it's saved, the undo history is grayed out. So don't get caught out by that. Regularly save what you're doing. And certainly if you're going to step away for a cup of coffee or something like that, make sure you save your progress. Okay, so we've created our first block here, which has just got some basic text and an image here. But notice that when I hover my mouse over this block, notice there are two purple handles that appear on the extremes, the left hand and right hand extremes. And if you hover your mouse over those handles, you get this little weird cursor on your mouse. And if you click and drag, something really cool happens. You can actually restrict this into one of four columns. Yeah, by all means, Deborah. So I can actually start now to create multiple column layouts, and I have four quartiles to play with. Let's just make this 2/3 like this. And then let's come up here. Remember it in Ultra, whenever we want to create something new, we're looking for that little plus symbol, and we can place things where we want to place them. So I can either create one down here, or I can create one up here. And I'm going to create another block. Okay. And this time I'm going to attach a Word document, if I can find one that we can use. Um, Try and find a Word document that I can use. Just use this one. It's a recent template that marketing have displayed for us. So file gets uploaded. And then once the file is uploaded, Blackboard asks us, how do you want this to be displayed? So we'll call this template. And then we'll tap save. And now that then gets displayed as a file that can be downloaded by the students. But again, it's occupying the full width. So if we now hover our mouse over this left-hand edge and go in the opposite direction, we can get this down to 2 columns or even just 1 column, but let's leave it at 2. And then remember how we move things in Ultra? We're always looking for that little handle of 6 dots. There it is on the top of the block. And if we click on that and drag down, Ultra's going to show us different potential landing points for this block, depending on the size of the block and where it would fit in other places in the document. I would like to go here alongside my text block and my image block, and I'm going to click. I'm now going to let go. And now the white space that was occupying the top of that document, it gets removed because we don't need it there. It's just creating a necessary vertical space. And now we have a 2 column layout that allows a slightly more readable, a slightly more accessible experience. You don't want wide paragraphs of text as a general rule. There's always exceptions, but as a general rule, we don't want wide paragraphs of text. It takes a long, it's kind of not a great reading experience. You know this when you pick up a book. Whenever the size of the page gets around a certain threshold, people start adding multiple columns on a newspaper or a magazine or whatever it might be. So that's what we're doing here. We're thinking, how does this content best display from an accessibility point of view, and how does it best display from an aesthetic point of view as well? For sighted users, we want to make it look attractive as well. Okay, and again, just to Deborah's point, we're going to tap save. That gets saved into the system, and that's good. There's nothing more you need to do. If I come out of here by clicking the cross symbol, and I go back into Unit 1 Introduction, which is our document, you can see it's definitely saved. Okay. So basically, once that Edit Content button comes up, you know that the previous save is stored in the system. Okay. So I've clicked Edit Content again, and we're back into our block mode content creation process. We've talked about dragging and dropping things around. So just to remind you, if you want to move this block over here and this block over there, if we click on the handle and then drag and drop that down here, and then pick up this block and drag and drop it over there, you can move these two things around very easily. Now, I don't think that looks as nice. There's too much white space on the left-hand side. So what am I going to do to go back? We're going to click the undo button, and we're back to where we were. The beautiful thing about this is you can take the risk of moving things around to see if it would look better, and if it doesn't, you can always step back, rewind to where you were before. Now,
Forgive me. I don't know where the save button is. Are you going to the plus? How did you save that?
up here on the right-hand side.
The right-hand side. Oh, okay, I have my thumbnail here, so I can't see that.
Ah, there we go. Yeah. Yeah. So on the menu bar here, but on the right-hand side. Everyone else seeing that? Got that in your yeah. Good. Okay. No, that well, thank you, Deborah. I'm glad that's sorted. So that's it saved. Now, at some point, you might want to think to yourself, how does this look to students? And we covered this briefly yesterday. but I'll mention it again today. In order to validate the students' experience of this, we need to come out into the course content outline and we need to use student preview. Now, before we do that, we need to check that it's actually visible, and we haven't talked about that yet. So let's talk about that briefly now. Whenever you create a new content item in Ultra, it's always going to be hidden from students by default, hidden by default. Now, these options for changing the visibility are right here embedded within the content outline. You don't have to access a menu. It's not in here. It's right here. You can literally tap on this drop down and you can change it to visible to students. Doing that is all very well, but it's living inside of a folder which is hidden from students. So we need to make sure that that folder itself is visible as well. And just to be absolutely sure, we'll just check the learning module. Yep, that's visible to students. So these three items, not this one's still hidden, but these three items should be now visible to our student on our student preview. And we'll go and check that now. So to do that, we're coming up here on the right-hand side, the right-hand extreme of the screen, clicking student preview and then confirming, yep, I'd like to start the preview. Now, in reality, the experience that students have with the content that we're creating and the content that we see, there's not much difference in it. There's just a little less clutter in terms of options to manage that content. So what you see in your view of the content is pretty true to what students are going to see. But this just gives us that peace of mind that, yeah, it's really working correctly. So we'll open this folder, we'll jump into Unit 1 Introduction, and there it is. So students have the table of contents menu. They don't have the edit content button. They're not able to make any changes to this, but depending on whether we've given them the options to download or not, they will or will not have those controls available to them. So this document here, they can download the original file. We gave them that permission. This image here, there's no button for them to download it. Of course, if they know what they're doing with the browser, there's no way to stop you from downloading the content. Students do have a more options button so that they can expand on images and video content, and that's to improve their experience of the content, especially if there's information in the image. There isn't in this case, except there's photographic information, which if they were on a photography course, they'd obviously want to study the image more close up. On the right-hand side of the enlarged image, there's a little white cross, and when we hover over it, it inverts to make it clear that we're now ready to close this image. We tap that close button, and we're back into the page again. So that's the student experience with the additional control that they have progress tracking in their view, but that's not something we control from a content development point of view. That's just the progress tracking feature doing what the progress tracking feature does. Oh, Dominic, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, would you go back to the prior page where it's just the units and the subjects within each unit? Yes. So how do we do it without having to go into every single subfile and visual, and make it visual? Is there a way to do it in the unit one topic title, just do it one time and everything in that entire thing becomes visible?
Yes, there is. Yeah. So if we come out of here, how do we change multiple items to be visible, especially if you're doing this at the end of your, design process? So what Dominic is saying is that we don't want to have to go on all these items individually and change the visibility. If you scroll back up to the top of the course and you tap on the three dots, the options button for the core settings, this is going to allow you to do batch edit. And there are a number of different types of batch edit, but one of them is visibility. So we tap on that and we get the structure of our course at the learning module level. If we expand on Unit 1, we can tap on all of these three items, or as many as we like. We could expand this folder here and do it on this folder as well. And as you do that, it summarizes how many items you've selected. And then I guess we probably want to tap on this one as well, just to be absolutely sure. And then down the bottom here on the bottom right hand side, you've got dates, deletion, and visibility. And it's the edit visibility that we want. So if we tap on that and we say visible to students, that's then going to go away and update the visibility for each of those items based on what we configure here. If we click Save Visibility, it says please wait while your content updates. And now you should see this eyeball icon has changed from a line through it to a open eyeball, confirming that that's taken place. Okay.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Tara told me that at one point, but I completely forgot. That's helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, so batch edits are all done under this menu here, the options menu, batch edit. Super handy. Really useful for due dates as well. I'll talk about that a little bit later before we wrap up today. Shifting due dates, pulling them back, pushing them forward. We'll come back and look at that in just a moment. So before we finish off here in terms of creating documents, um, I want to show you a couple of other things that you should be aware of. We're going to come back into the document editor. So we'll tap Edit Content. Okay. We're going to come down here now and we're going to tap the plus symbol. Now, there are a wide range of different blocks that we can add in here. We can add a divider in, which will just create a dotted, a sort of a hard line, which can be useful if you're trying to chunk up content and create some sort of cognitive, literally a line that just sort of cognitively tells the student, we're moving on from this to that. However, it may be at that point that you should really be creating a separate document on the left-hand side. So think about how long you want your pages to be, how long you want your documents to be, and whether a line is the appropriate way of chunking, or actually a new document would be a better way of chunking. And it's going to depend really from a pedagogical point of view how how you want to present the information and how you want the students to each time they go to the next document, that is in and of itself telling them like this is the next page. It could be a new concept, a new topic. Whereas if it's to do with the current topic, you probably want to leave it in here. But that's all. Those are decisions you'll take in the process of creating your content. You can also upload content from a cloud service if you've logged into that service with something like OneDrive or yeah, Dropbox or Google Drive. You can bring content across from those systems. The benefit of doing that, of course, is that any content that lives outside on those platforms that you're pointing students to using a link, if at any point those files get lost in your OneDrive or they get deleted, then the links to those files from this course will no longer work. Now that might not matter. You might be cool with that. But there can be a problem from a long-term point of view, especially if you're wanting to restore a course in months or years' time. Linking to cloud-based sources may or may not be the best way. So pulling that content in from the cloud and then storing it in the Blackboard course, it creates a self-contained unit of all the different resources that you're using at any one point in time versus constantly pointing out things that might change in the future. Those of you that use a content collection, you can use that to organize your content. Let's talk about knowledge check. Knowledge check. So this is all very well, and you can use if we tap save, we use the student progress feature. You can use a student progress feature to track engagement. When did the students start looking at this content? When did they mark it complete? Or how many have actually not opened it yet? You'll see all this data in the student progress area. That's great, and it's useful from your perspective. But really, how do you know whether the student's actually engaging with this content? How do you know that they're not just sort of, just scrolling up the page and then moving on to the next item? how do you actually create something that gives them the opportunity to evaluate their own understanding? Well, that's what the knowledge block is for. So we'll re-edit content, we'll scroll down, we'll look for the plus symbol at the bottom of this area here, we'll tap the plus symbol, and we'll choose knowledge check. Now we can enter our question here if we've got a particular concept we want to evaluate in mind, or we can have Blackboard give us some suggestions, and it's going to go away and do a couple of things. Based on this document, which is where you've asked the knowledge check to be created, it's going to create uh, some simple multiple choice style questions, and you have the ability to frame the question, the premise, the sort of the basis of the question. You have the ability to sort of frame that in more particular terms by entering specific terms in here that will help you get a better response from what is basically the AI design assistant in Blackboard. You can also frame the prompt, because that's what's happening here. You can also frame the prompt by selecting other documents in the course that you want to inform the knowledge check. So we could go through to unit one and we could say, well, I want you to draw from this document as well as the document that I'm in order to frame the basis of knowledge for this knowledge check. You can do that as well. We'll do that in this case. And then finally, you can specify a level of complexity. How complex do you want this to be from a sort of a learning perspective? So we can choose that, and then we can choose generate. We've got some options here, and if I'm happy with one of these options, I can just select that option and add it to document. Now, I need to check this. This is like all AI, it's never 100% reliable. So if I think this is a poorly framed question, then I need to check it. This is quite funny that it's picked up obviously that I'm using lorem ipsum in the document, and I also need to check that it's got the correct answer. Um, this is quite a dubious question, I would say. I would say the correct answer is more likely to be something like in design. But anyway, I don't really know the answer, so I'm not the expert to be evaluating these questions. In any case, you're in control of this. If you don't like the questions, you can cancel and just write your own. If you do like the question, then you can, like this one is, I prefer this question. It's a bit more believable. I need to double check that that's the correct date. But if you're the academic building these things, then unlike my superficial illustration here, you'll have the confidence to be able to evaluate immediately whether this is true or not. I'm going to add this to my document. And now at the bottom of the page, we have this knowledge check, which is just a subtle way of allowing the students to get in the habit of assessing themselves. And what you'll have as an instructor is you'll have some data points to see how many students are actually engaging with this knowledge check or not. And that might give you a data point, which with some triangulation will help you determine how well or not this cohort may be engaged in the material. So,
Question.
yeah,
Is it able to give random questions, or it's going to be the same questions that all students would say?
it's going to be the same. Yeah,
Same.
it's going to be the same. If you want to randomize the knowledge check, you'd need to build a quiz, which we'll be covering in an upcoming session. So I think we touched on that possibly towards the end of next week.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a great idea, Jermaine. It'd be good if this was randomized, but it's not really it's definitely not a summative tool. It's more of a formative tool. So it kind of makes sense in some ways that it is just it's a what would you call it, a uh yeah, it's a generic question for all of the different students, and it's a very subtle mechanism from a learning perspective. So there are a number of blocks in this experience. I'd encourage you to experiment with the different options, and I think we'll leave it there. We'll come back if we've got further time to cover some of the other details here. We've covered editing blocks, moving blocks around. This is the delete button. So if I want to remove this block and tap the trash icon, I can click delete. If I suddenly regret that, what do I need to do? Tap the undo button. It's very cool to have that undo button there. Saved myself a number of times when working with this tool. So let's talk a little now about not just hidden and visible, but release conditions. Now we saw these two controls back in the content outline over here. Oh, I didn't quite tap on the drop down. There we go. You have to be quite precise. You have to, if you tap on anything around this area here, it's just going to open the document. So you have to kind of place your mouse on that little drop down or in this area here, and then you get this drop down here. But you also get it inside of the item as well. You get release conditions. Now, this is not the same as a due date. It's not the same as a due date. This is about when I want this content item to be available to students. And there's a wide different range of use cases. You might want to say students who have passed prior formative quiz or have completed the prior formative quiz. If you're doing that, then you're going to say activity, you're going to choose an item, and you're going to choose the quiz from this drop down and specify a requirement. Maybe they need to get 5 out of 10, or they need to get 80%, or whatever it might be. Alternatively, the rule could be specific students, just specific students. And then you would choose those individual students from this list here, and you tap save, and then that gets added as a rule on your left hand side here. Okay, we're going to add another rule because we can stack them if we want to, and this rule would be specific groups. And again, you choose the specific members or groups, but this time you choose from the drop down over here, so you can do specific groups. You can also do date and time options. So after the Wednesday lecture, you might want to hold off on releasing something until after the lecture. So you tap date and time, and you say access from next Wednesday, after whenever it is. So we'll choose 4 p.m. And you can even say you want to withdraw access to this item after a certain time as well. We'll just keep it simple and choose access from. We're going to say all members to make it simpler. So everybody can access this from after that date. And then we tap save. Now, this can obviously get quite complicated, and you can use Student Preview to evaluate the efficacy of and the reliability of these different rules that you're creating. But there's a lot of controls here for sequencing content in a way that makes sense. What you don't want to do, and again, I'm not teaching you how to teach, I'm just focusing on Blackboard, but throwing in a few best practices. You obviously don't want to frustrate students by making things inordinately restrictive. So you could gamify things as well. I think I mentioned this yesterday. You could release something, after a specific date or time, and when they complete a level, which is a quiz in Blackboard, a level on a previous module, you can do like that as well. That's gamifying it, and that's more likely to be motivating than demotivating. But we need to be careful here about how we build these things so that it's not too restrictive. For certain learners, that could be more problematic than others. Anyway, I'll focus on the functionality. If at any point you think, I want to remove this rule here, tap on the rule, I'm going to click continue. Tap on the rule, come over to the three dots. Remember in Ultra, if you can't see an action you want to take, it's there. It's just not visible because it makes things too cluttered. But underneath this item here, it would make sense to have that as a button because it's just two clicks for one thing. But but there it is. Tap delete. No confirmation. Just gets the rule gets deleted. And now what this condition is based off of one rule, which is after the Wednesday lecture. Okay. There can be inherited conditions. So bear that in mind. There can be other conditions that would control the release of other items so that the release of the conditions that are controlling the visibility of this item may be superseded by some prior conditions. So bear that in mind when you're designing these flows as well. And when you select one of these conditions, you have controls over whether you want students to actually see the content and its restriction or not. So, for example, if I was to put some content together and it was just for my learners who were perhaps in the lower grade boundaries, I wouldn't necessarily want to show that to everybody because it might demotivate students. It might create other problematic behaviors as well. So I might actually want to hide that item, or even I might want to hide an item. I might want to hide a certain set of content from students who are in in the higher percentile or the lower percentile. So think carefully about whether you want this to be uh, shown or hidden. I'll give you a preview of what it looks like when it's shown. So we'll tap the cross button on here. Notice now that it doesn't say hidden or visible. It says release conditions. If I come out of here and I hover over the release conditions qualifier, it explains students can access the content after the date that we've set. And if I go into student preview mode, and we scroll down to Unit 1, and we go into the Unit 1 folder, this now says content isn't available. And when the student hovers over that little message, it tells the student when they can access this content. If, for whatever reason, you don't want them to know that the content is even there and you want to surprise them with it, or for reasons of segmenting the cohort into different grade boundaries, you don't want certain of those groups to know because you're trying not to you're trying not to demotivate, whatever the reason, there may be other reasons for this, then you would want to choose hide, and then the item simply will not be visible at all. It will not be visible, and it will simply just appear um, in the student's view. Obviously, if that is a setting you configure, you need to manage the student's expectations accordingly. So you don't want to be constantly surprising them unless you told them that that's the way the course is built. So that's the student experience when something is held on release conditions and the conditions are shown to the students. We'll tap exit and we'll click save. And we'll come back just to circle back so that the penny drops in terms of you being comfortable with the way this works. Tap release conditions. Tap release conditions again. No, sorry, that's wrong. Tap edit release conditions. It literally says edit release conditions. And here you are back into the the tool here that will allow you to make those changes, either showing or hiding or adding new rules. Okay. Any questions about release conditions? Again, it's one of those things that you only really have questions about in a meaningful way often when you actually get to play with it. So definitely encourage you to use the time in between these workshops if you're if you're studiously attending lots of them, to practice and experiment, and feel free in subsequent sessions to come back and ask questions. While you're just thinking about all that, I'm just going to check through my list. There's one thing I think I haven't covered, and we'll go back and cover that now before we wrap up. Yeah, no questions? Okay, good. Well, I don't know if it's good, but um, it's typical, right? You can't really know until you start playing. So we have been primarily focused today on native on creating content inside of Blackboard, but we've shown that you can upload external content as well. When I say native, I'm talking about stuff that's designed to work in Blackboard in the product itself. But you can see that even a PowerPoint document, it works very well. It's a nice experience, with some pluses and minuses in terms of the merits or demerits of one different content type over another. However, we've barely scratched the surface in terms of what's living on this create menu over here. We've just been focusing on documents, and inside of those documents, we showed that you can create links inside the content blocks. But if you want to, you could place a link directly out here. And once again, as always, you get to choose the display name. So I'm just going to put this here, um, Coldwell University. I'm just going to be lazy and do a search for it. Copy that link and come back here, and I can do copy paste into, oh, that's not a tidy link. We don't like that. Don't like that at all. Let's copy that one. There we go. And you can add a description as well, just to make it a little bit more explicit what this is going to do. And you can decide whether you want it opening in a new window or whether you want it to go as if they're just in Blackboard and they leave Blackboard behind. Generally speaking, it's preferable to have it open in a new window, but from an accessibility point of view, it's a kind of open debate. The other type of link that you can add in is a course link. You may have some existing content that you want to refer to. And so if you tap on, for example, document and do a search, it's going to pull all the existing documents, and you can place a link to a file that might be at the very bottom of your course outline. You can place a link to that in this content folder that you're in there. It's just a link. You're not duplicating content. It's a great way to refer back to things like a syllabus, when students are buried all the way back down, possibly at the end folder, and you want to point them back to something else. So that's a really useful way to add in a link to an existing piece of content. Oh, it's gone. That was I didn't know that did that actually. See, I'm learning something myself. There we are. If you skip tabs, it loses the information you've entered. Tap save. So now, again, it's hidden by default. So we need to click on this drop down and choose visible. Let's try that again. Yeah, you can add a link of Google Drive to a Google Drive folder. It will be accessible based on the permissions that you've given them in Google Drive. So that's more a question of permissions on the folder in Google Drive, less, Blackboard. But you could absolutely, I don't know why this isn't making it visible. That's odd. Let's edit and try and do it inside of here. That might just be an oddity of me doing a live demo, but it could be a bug. I don't know. I'll have to test that somewhere else. You can also create links to LTI tools. And if you use LTI for anything, learning tools, interoperability, things like Padlet, H5P, some of the publishers. So if you're using any LTI tools, you can plumb those in here as well. And if you are, you'll know what this is all about. You need a configuration URL. You need to decide whether it's a gradable entry. And the same workflow applies. It's a small peak pane rather than a big one. but you've got the top here, you have your LTI tool, which, could be something like Padlet. If any of you have played with Padlet, and you paste the URL in here and off you go. That will then uh, allow the students, if it's a thoroughbred LTI tool, it will allow the students to connect into that tool without any authentication. It just treats them as a student because they are a student in Blackboard. I mean, it is authenticating, but it's using LTI to do that. So LTI tools can be added in as well. And I think that touches on everything that we've got here on our roadmap for today's session. So just as we wrap up here, we've talked about how we can move content around to create the right structure in our courses. We talked about creating documents, either by uploading existing content that we've got and having Blackboard basically format it nicely for a mobile responsive experience, or like Deborah said earlier, just uploading our existing content and allowing students to either download it or view it in the ways that we've described. We've talked about the use of knowledge checks and also the document layout tool to translate, to give you different ideas about how you can lay things out. We've talked about how you can have multiple column layouts to make things look visually more appealing and presented in the screen in a way which is perhaps a little bit more readable. And we talked about we've touched very lightly. There's a lot more that could be said, but we've touched very lightly on accessibility when we're uploading content to make sure that that content is accessible in terms of a screen reader and really, make sure that the content is accessible to the widest group of students possible. Because even the little tooltips that you get from an alt text description can be useful for sighted learners as well. Remember, you can use the student preview feature in order to test all this. Make sure that it's behaving how you believe it ought to behave. But I think that nicely covers the whole concept of content creation in Blackboard. And in the next session, we'll be focused more closely on I think it's tests and assignments. So if you're interested in creating quizzes or tests or assignments, we have those in our upcoming sessions. Okay. Any final closing questions? Would you like this to go faster? Would you like it to go slower?
I think this is just right.
Okay.
Just right. The pace is, yeah, just right.
Good. All right, that's great feedback.
Yeah.
And I told Tara if any of you do have feedback and you'd rather share that directly with her than me directly, to make sure these future sessions are serving you well, please speak to Tara, and I'm happy to take that feedback on board. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and see you next
Thank you
time.
so much.
Yes.
See you.
Thank you.
See you
Thank